There's a mathematical sequence in financial history that has destroyed every dominant currency over the past 6 centuries. Not some of them. Every single one. It's not random. It's not unpredictable. It's an 8-stage death spiral that plays out with chilling precision every time. And right now, in 2025, the United States dollar is deep into stage 6. 5 global reserve currencies have risen to dominance over the last 600 years. 5 currencies that once seemed invincible, trusted everywhere, accepted by everyone. The foundation of global trade, the Portuguese real, the Spanish dollar, the Dutch guilder, the British pound sterling, and now the American dollar. 4 have already collapsed. The 5th is showing every symptom that killed the others. This is the story of how reserve currencies actually die, and why the pattern says we're just 2 stages away from watching it happen again. Stage 1. Dominance. Here's how the cycle always begins. A nation achieves overwhelming superiority. Not just military strength, economic dominance. They produce more, trade more, innovate more than anyone else. Portugal controlled the spice routes from Asia in the 1400s. Spain discovered mountains of silver in the Americas. The Dutch built the world's first modern financial system. Britain pioneered the Industrial Revolution and ruled a quarter of the planet. And America? After World War II, the U.S. economy represented half of global GDP. We held 60% of the world's gold reserves. When you're that dominant, your currency becomes essential. Everyone needs it to trade. Your money becomes the world's money. That's stage 1, and it can last for decades, even centuries. Stage 2. Overextension. But here's where it always starts to crack. The empire overreaches. Portugal tried to defend trading posts across 4 continents, with a population of just 1.5 million people. Spain fought wars simultaneously in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The Dutch, with only 2 million citizens, attempted to compete with empires 10 times their size. Britain tried to hold together an empire so vast that the sun literally never set on it. In America, we maintain over 750 military bases in more than 80 countries. We've fought wars in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. We've committed to defending Europe, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Middle East, all at once. Our military budget is $850 billion annually. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. The reserve currency privilege creates a dangerous illusion. You believe you can afford anything because the world needs your money. So you expand, and expand, and expand, until the costs become impossible to sustain. Stage 3. Structural deficits. Stage 3 is when the math stops working. Revenue can no longer cover expenses. The government runs deficits, not temporary ones during crisis, but permanent structural deficits year after year. Portugal borrowed from Italian and German bankers to fund their empire. Spain, despite importing 200 tons of silver annually from the Americas, still couldn't pay their bills. King Philip II spent half the empire's revenue on the military alone, and it still wasn't enough. Britain spent an astronomical £50 billion fighting World War I, money they didn't have. They borrowed from America, sold overseas assets, ran deficits that would have been unthinkable just years before. And the United States? In 2000, our national debt was $5.6 trillion. Today, it's $36 trillion. We've run deficits every single year except 4 since 1970. In 2024, with a growing economy and low unemployment, we still ran a $1.8 trillion deficit. This isn't temporary. This is structural. We spend more than we collect every single year with no plan to stop. Stage 4. Money printing. So what happens when borrowing isn't enough? Stage 4. You expand the money supply. In ancient times, this meant mixing cheap metals into gold and silver coins. Portuguese coins that were supposed to be pure gold became 50% copper. Spanish mints stamped coins as 8 reals of silver when they contained only 4. Modern governments don't need to melt down coins. They just create money electronically. After the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet exploded from $800 billion to $9 trillion. In 2020 and 2021 alone, we printed $6 trillion, increasing the money supply by 40% in just 2 years. That's not a policy response. That's monetary debasement on a scale that would make the Weimar Republic look restrained. When you print money faster than your economy grows, you're diluting the value of every dollar in existence, and the world notices. Stage 5. Inflation. Stage 5 is the inevitable result, inflation. When you debase your currency, prices rise. It happened to Portugal in the 1520s. Spain experienced severe inflation by the 1600s, as debased coins flooded the economy. Even prosperous Holland saw rising prices by 1700. Britain faced accelerating inflation after World War II as they printed money to rebuild. By the 1960s, the pound was losing significant purchasing power. And America? Inflation hit 9% in 2022, the highest in 4 decades. Prices for food, housing, energy all surged. Real wages couldn't keep up. The Federal Reserve responded by raising interest rates, which has slowed inflation but created a new problem. We're now paying over $1 trillion per year just in interest on our debt. That's more than we spend on defense, more than Medicare. We're in stage 5 right now, and inflation is still running above the Fed's target. Stage 6. Loss of confidence. This is the critical stage. This is where empires realize the game is ending. By 1530, international merchants no longer trusted Portuguese coins. They demanded Spanish silver instead. By 1640, Spain had declared bankruptcy 4 times in 90 years. Nobody trusted Spanish financial management anymore. The Dutch guilder didn't collapse overnight. Confidence just slowly evaporated as Britain rose to power. And Britain? At Bretton Woods in 1944, they tried to preserve the pound's reserve status. But the world chose the dollar instead. Loss of confidence isn't dramatic. It's gradual. But once it starts, it's nearly impossible to reverse, and that's exactly where the dollar is today. China has slashed their U.S. Treasury holdings from over $1 trillion to $700 billion. Russia eliminated dollar reserves entirely after 2022. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Iran, and Ethiopia, are actively building payment systems to bypass the dollar completely. The M-Bridge system, bilateral currency swaps, trade in local currencies, global dollar reserves have fallen from 73% in 2000 to 58% in 2020 to under 55% today. That's not just a statistic. That's loss of confidence. That's foreign central banks quietly preparing for a post-dollar world. We are in stage 6 right now. Stage 7. Alternatives emerge. When confidence breaks, alternatives rise. Spain's silver replaced Portugal's gold. Dutch guilders replaced Spanish silver. British pounds replaced Dutch guilders. American dollars replaced British pounds. The pattern is absolute. And today, the pieces are already forming. China is conducting oil purchases with Saudi Arabia in yuan, not dollars. The euro remains the second most held reserve currency. BRICS nations are discussing a gold-backed currency or a basket arrangement. Central bank digital currencies are being developed by over 100 countries. Even Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are gaining adoption as alternatives to fiat money. The alternatives aren't dominant yet, but they're emerging. The infrastructure is being built. The deals are being negotiated. We're in early stage 7, and history shows that once alternatives gain momentum, the transition accelerates rapidly. Stage 8, collapse. Stage 8 is what every empire desperately tries to avoid, but none ever do. The reserve currency loses its privilege. Countries no longer need to hold massive reserves of it. Trade shifts to other currencies. Commodities get priced in alternatives, and suddenly, the nation that issued that currency can no longer borrow unlimited amounts at artificially low interest rates. They can no longer export their inflation to the rest of the world. The deficits that were sustainable under reserve status become catastrophic. Portugal collapsed by 1540, Spain by 1650. The Dutch guilder lost status by 1750. Britain went from Bretton Woods in 1944 to complete loss of reserve status by 1970, just 26 years. When stage 8 arrives, everything changes fast. The empire doesn't vanish, but its power evaporates. Its standard of living crashes, its global influence shrinks. Because reserve currency status isn't just about money, it's about power. It's about living beyond your means without consequences. It's about making the rest of the world pay for your deficits. And when that privilege ends, reality returns with brutal force. The pattern never lies. Let me make this crystal clear. 5 reserve currencies over 600 years. 5 followed the exact same 8-stage pattern. 5 collapsed. Portuguese Real, 80 years. Spanish dollar, 110 years. Dutch guilder, 80 years. British pound, 224 years. Average lifespan, 120 years. The US dollar has been the reserve currency for 81 years. We've completed stages 1 through 5. We're deep into stage 6. Early signs of stage 7 are appearing. Maybe America is different. Maybe technology, military dominance, or the sheer size of our economy will break the pattern. But Portugal thought their spice routes were unassailable. Spain thought unlimited silver meant permanent power. The Dutch thought financial innovation was enough. Britain thought the empire would last forever. All believed they were exceptional. None were. What happens next? Here's what the pattern tells us. Once a reserve currency reaches stage 6, loss of confidence, the final 2 stages come quickly. Britain's collapse took 26 years. The dollar could last another decade, maybe 2. But the mathematical forces are already in motion. Every $1 trillion we add to the debt makes it worse. Every percentage point of inflation erodes trust. Every country that builds an alternative payment system weakens the dollar's network effect. The American standard of living, built on 80 years of being able to print money that the world had no choice but to accept, is built on a foundation that's crumbling. When reserve status ends, we won't be able to run $1.8 trillion deficits. We won't be able to import $800 billion more than we export every year. Interest rates will spike. Inflation will surge. The government will face impossible choices. This isn't doomsaying, this is pattern recognition. The warning signs. If you're watching this in 2025, here's what to monitor. Foreign central bank behavior. Are they continuing to reduce dollar holdings? Yes. Alternative payment systems. Are more countries joining BRICS payment networks? Yes. Dollar's share of reserves. Is it continuing to decline? Yes. U.S. debt trajectory. Is it accelerating or slowing? Accelerating. Inflation persistence. Is it staying above target? Yes. Political dysfunction. Can the government make the tough choices needed to fix the fundamentals? History says no. Every indicator is flashing red. The pattern has repeated 5 times over 600 years. Stages 1 through 5 complete. Stage 6 in progress. Stage 7 emerging. The math is inevitable. The history is clear. And the warning signs are everywhere. 5 reserve currencies followed 8 stages. All 5 collapsed. The 6th is following the same pattern. Stage 6, complete. Stages 7 and 8, ahead. This isn't about politics. It's not about left or right, Republican or Democrat. This is about mathematical forces that have destroyed every reserve currency in history. If this opened your eyes to where the dollar actually stands in the reserve currency death cycle, subscribe to the Wealth Forum. Because when stages 7 and 8 arrive, when alternatives replace the dollar and reserve status collapses, you'll want to understand why America's financial power evaporated so quickly. The answers aren't hiding in the future. They're written in 600 years of monetary history, and the pattern never lies.